Andrew was in Grandpa's room, and he was having a nightmare, so I woke him up and I brought him to your room. Then I went to the back hallway, saw the door open, heard something, and then I woke everyone up.
Andrew was in the other room.
Yes.
Is that true, baby?
I can't remember.
Did you see Stanley last night?
I can't remember.
Andrew?
Was he sleepwalk?
No. He doesn't sleepwalk.
This doesn't make any sense, because Andrew is barely tall enough to reach those locks. You're positive that the door is already open?
Yes.
How can you be positive? It was the middle of the night. You could have been half asleep.
He said he was sure.
I was wide awake. I'm positive.
Look, I'm not saying you're lying, Travis. I'm just saying it was the middle of the night. Maybe you're not remembering correctly.
I know what I saw. I'm sorry, but the door was open before I got there.
All right, I'm not going to jump to any conclusions, but just to be safe, I think that we all shouldn't interact for a day or so.
Dad, I'm sure it's fine.
Listen, I'm just taking proper precautions, okay?
That the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
No. Be afraid. Be very afraid.
There is nothing to fear except God. Whatever that means to you.
Do I look like someone who cares what God thinks?
You're listening to The Fear of God, a podcast exploring the intersection between Christianity and the horror genre.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to not just a brand new episode of The Fear of God, your favorite podcast, ours too, but also a brand new year. It is 2018. For certain of us, we were worried 2017 would be it. It was over. It was lights out on society and civilization, which is an interesting comment to make in light of the movie we're covering today. With me, as always, is Reed Lackey.
What?
What's up, Reed?
I'm infected. I'm
Oh,
infected
man.
with the sickness, Nathan.
That's not good.
No,
how
it's
you
not.
doing, buddy?
I'm all right. I'm on like week 49 of this cold that
that's a lot of
dealing
weeks.
with. That's a lot of weeks. Yeah,
Hopefully it will not persist much longer. I did want to, we alluded sort of to this in Rear Window last week, but one, we are doing a sort of year-long look at a handful of Hitchcock films in our
Indeed.
hashtag Alfred from Melmac series, and it's gonna stick. It's gonna stick until you
We're
come
gonna
up with
make
something
it.
better. Right.
That's right.
Interestingly, for January, for this particular month, January 2018, we thought it would be fun in this sort of thread of Rear Window looking back to do a handful of flicks that came out in 2017. So,
yes.
Kind of looking back at the last year, here's some movies we didn't get to. We don't generally love just like doing of the moment movies like this one came out this week, partly just because of timing and logistics, partly just because
Sure.
we want stuff to kind of be a bit more perennial than that. But we did think it'd be fun. And who knows, maybe this will persist through subsequent Fear of God Januaries, to do kind of looks back at the previous year's horror movies that we did not cover. So today,
Yes.
Reed,
Nathan.
today we are talking It Comes at Night, directed by Trey Edward Shults. But before
Indeed.
we get to this movie conversation, Reed, I just gotta know what you're watching, what you're reading, what are you listening to? You started last week. I'm gonna start this week. I don't know if this is on your radar at all, but I have been watching The Runaways on Hulu.
Oh, I've heard about it. I've heard a lot of really good things.
Well, I don't know what exactly the things are that you've heard, but really good is
Good ones.
a phrase that I would use in relation to this show. So, The Runaway is a Hulu TV show based on a Marvel comic property, created by Brian K. Vaughan back in 2002. And he would say by Brian K. Vaughan and Adrian Alfona, who was the, penciler at the time, the illustrator. Really great. In fact, the other podcast I occasionally reference on here and listen to rather, frequently is called The Watch. And Andy Greenwald of The Watch, who's also a comic fan, and they're both culture aficionados, has referenced The Runaways as one of the best Marvel concepts since Spider-Man, more or less.
Wow.
And it's an easy log line, that being every teenager thinks their parents are evil. What if that were actually true? And so that's kind of the impetus for the show, well, the book, and ultimately now the show. But man, I was a big fan of the comic series. And in fact, it's interesting. Did you have read it, or you've never read it?
No, I've never read it.
Okay.
I remember you talking about the comic series when we were roommates, like
years ago,
very highly praising it. Yeah.
Well, Vaughn has an extended run on the series. Believe it or not, Joss Whedon takes it over at a certain point, and for as much as I like Whedon, his is it's one of my least favorite things I've read of his, and it just really, it's not a great sort of take on the characters, but yeah, the idea is these kids discover that their parents are part of this secret, kind of nefarious cabal of villainy, right. Sort of, as the title suggests, run away. The show takes the skeleton of the comic series and adds some meat on the bones in a way that's really interesting and fun. And I don't know, I'm digging it. It does have a few limitations in terms of the television media and budget, that sometimes the strings show a little bit, but overall, it's a really solid effort. And I wouldn't put it at like frivolous, if you just have nothing better to do. I would rank it above that. I wouldn't put it as like burning, you must watch this now. But I would say if you're like, you know what, I'm kind of through my DVR, I want something that's fun, and will not just be pure popcorn, it is definitely worth a look.
Nice. That's a quality recommendation right there.
Well, thank you. It's a quality show.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out at some point. If I do, I'll let you know when I do. I actually have a listening to. That's a bit, that's a bit left field.
Let's hear it.
Right. Well, listen then.
I'm trying. Just say it.
So, an artist who I've known about for a number of years, probably at least a decade now at this point, but have never really dove much into her catalog very deeply. I was first exposed to the artist known as Sia through a song that was on the soundtrack to the TV show 6 Feet Under that I really responded to. It's an old song of hers called Breathe Me that is a really powerful song. That song plays over top of some of the final moments of the series finale of 6 Feet Under. So I was very taken with that particular song, but I've never really listened to much Sia. And then I found it oddly that like I would occasionally, probably in the last like year or two, I would see a random movie and there would be a song at the end of the movie and I would really like it. And then I would go look it up and I'd be like, oh, dang, that's Sia. And then that experience happened probably 4 or 5 times where I was like, I'm watching a movie. I really like the song that closes the movie out. And then I'm like, oh, I want to see who that is. I look it up. Oh, it's Sia. And then, oh, it's Sia. Oh, it's Sia. So then it's
okay,
like,
we get it.
So it's like it would happen like over and over and over again. So I've just been spending, especially the last like couple of weeks, just sort of diving into some of her recent catalog, which I was relatively unfamiliar with. And man, she's great. I dig her a lot. I really like a lot of her stuff. So
do you have an album that you would recommend above others if we were to want to go check out?
The one I've been listening to the most extensively, it's one of the few full albums that I have rather than just piecemeal tracks on YouTube, is 1,000 Forms of Fear. Or 10,000 Forms of Fear. I can't remember if it's 1,000 or 10,000. I think it might be 10,000.
What if it's 100,000?
It's not.
Oh, okay.
But no. So that album is the one that I've been listening to beginning to end, and is a really strong album, and I like it a lot. I think her big hit from that was the song called Chandelier. Yeah, that's a great album. But I've been listening to a lot of the one that finally got me to like really dig in was the song that was featured in the movie Lion from last year, called Never Give Up.
Still not seen that, and I want really badly to see it, and I just haven't.
You should, man. It's great.
I know.
I think it's on Netflix.
I cry every time I see the trailer. So,
dude, it's so wonderful. Yeah, you really got it. And on Netflix, you are without excuse. So, but yeah, it's a really great movie. I think it's a very encouraging, well-made movie. But yeah, Sia has a song in it called "Never Give Up" that's really sort of a dance anthem for
I do. Hey, if I like any song, it's a dance anthem.
Well, you're gonna love Sia, and you're gonna love Never Give Up. So yeah. Anyway, I've just been getting a lot into her music recently, and really enjoying it. So I like it quite a bit.
Can you exit us with our song to a tune of a Sia track?
You know what's so funny is that if I had a little bit more maybe adult beverage in me, I might attempt it. But no, that's not gonna happen. That's not gonna happen.
Well, go do that, and we'll wait.
5 hours later, I'm like, "What's wrong?"
Oh wow.
No, so yeah, so that has been yet another edition of What You Watching. What you reading? What you listening to? Oh, leave a message after the tone. Okay, so yeah, so that was what you're watching, reading, listening to.
I love it. So that was fun. I don't know if I'll get around to listening to some Sia. I am familiar with Chandelier, and my brother-in-law did dress like her, or whatever the character is in the Chandelier video for Halloween last year, and it was really funny. Nice. Yeah, it was really funny. But let's jump into this movie, It Comes at Night. So, Reed, we were running down the list of what would be candidates for this sort of January 2017, or
right.
Yes, January 2018, 2017 horror retrospective. And this kind of made the list rather quickly.
Sure.
Had you seen the movie before us talking about it?
No. In fact, this is one of the rare moments where, we decided to talk about a film that I had not seen. Most of the time, I've seen it by the time we decide to talk about it. So, I had not seen it, but also, B, you had seen it. So this was even more rare because you got the chance to watch the movie in the theater. I missed it when it was in theaters and wasn't able to catch it until it came to digital release. So yeah, I had not seen it. I had heard enough about it that I feel like my expectations were about right. I had seen the director's earlier film, Krisha, and I really liked it. It's very different. It is a bit horrific, but not in the fear factor.
Well, I haven't seen it. What is the general plot of that?
Krisha is a lady who has been struggling with an addiction. If memory serves me correctly, the addiction itself is not explicitly specified.
That would make sense based on this movie.
Yeah, she is, but she is a recovering addict, and basically she attends a Thanksgiving. And the Thanksgiving, she's really sort of like the air in the film is she's attending this Thanksgiving. The family is kind of giving her kind of like one more chance,
right,
to like get over her struggles and be part of this family and all of that kind of stuff. And so the film is about her successes and failures in doing that. And it is heart-wrenching, and it is deeply emotional, and ends in the exact opposite place that you would expect it to end. I mean, sincerely, like if you watch this movie, like
as in a way that will tick you off as a viewer, as in a way that will be like, make you sort of challenge, like I was subverted, but maybe in a positive way as a viewer.
What's really interesting about the question that you just asked me is your second half described my experience. I was subverted in a way that I found very interesting. I could see somebody walking out getting really mad. at where it ended, because I will say this without spoiling a specific plot beat, it builds to a climactic moment, and then the film stops before that climactic moment is resolved.
Gotcha.
The film literally stops in the midst of a climactic clash. In a way, and you'd have to see the film and see the sort of textual denouement that they do on the film to kind of understand why I really walked away liking the film a lot. But yeah, it was pretty powerful. It impacted me greatly. Wound up being one of my favorite movies of 2016.
Interesting.
And so,
what did you think about this? I mean, I've got some specific thoughts I want to share, but I want to know in this. Yes, as you mentioned, this is my second viewing, but this being your first, what did you feel about It Comes at Night?
So the film craft at play I think is excellent,
it's
and in
amazing.
that degree, yeah, and in that capacity, I loved it. I feel like this is the kind of film that I loved and would easily revisit in a heartbeat. But I think it is also the kind of film that if people were to raise certain criticisms towards it, I don't know that I would argue with them. Like, I understand sort of it's what you and I have played around with before about the idea of the film the man was trying to make versus the film people were expecting or thinking they were going to get out of this. But it was very impactful. I was engrossed for the entire runtime. I loved it.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I am a testimony to your sort of example there. So I can't remember the last time I so rude having seen a trailer before a movie.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Because I knew nothing about the content of the film, but I had seen the trailer. Now, the trailer is a fantastically constructed trailer. I mean,
yes.
It's excellent. What, unfortunately, the trailer will do in the excellently constructed nature of it is prop up your expectations for something the movie isn't really interested in delivering.
Right.
And what I wrote down in my notes for this viewing is the phrase marvelously frustrating. I had never had such a marvelously frustrating experience, or I couldn't recall having such a marvelously frustrating experience as the first time I watched this movie.
I see that.
Because if you haven't watched this movie, I would definitely recommend watching it. It is not...
Yeah, I would too.
We've covered far more grotesque and sort of off-putting material. This has some frightening imagery, and I think maybe you'll echo this. It's very suspenseful, but it's not...
Yes.
It's not hard to watch in terms of the things that necessarily that are physically on screen.
I do agree. Yeah.
That said, so we're going to unpack this in very specific ways. So, not just the trailer, but the title invokes a very specific kind of object that you are anticipating. You're anticipating the movie to deliver.
Yeah.
So it's so funny, man. Like, I will often, once I've seen a piece of media that I'm anxious about or interested in or really like or whatever, I've got my kind of go-to critics that I like to go read. Okay, what did they say? What did they think?
Right.
And just to kind of gain some perspective. Usually that's more from a fun position. Like,
sure.
Here's the things I'm thinking about. I wonder how it gels with that. When I came out of the movie It Comes at Night at the theater, Reed, I needed context. I was like, I don't know what to make of what I just saw. It was so funny because I was experiencing what I think the nerds I rail against don't know how to compartmentalize. And what I mean by that is I was experiencing that animus. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Wait a minute. I think I'm pissed off at this movie, but I'm actually really impressed with it, but I'm kind of pissed off at it.
Right.
Because where was the monster? You know what I mean?
Sure,
It was
yeah, of course.
The movie, and we can go into this a little bit if you want to walk down this path. Like,
sure, let's do it.
The trailer definitely does suggest, and the movie flirts with suggesting that there is some sort of external threat.
Yeah.
That is common to the horror genre. You know, maybe it's a monster in the woods.
Yes.
Yeah. Maybe it's a monster in the woods. Maybe it's a ghost haunting the thing. Maybe it's the Blair Witch. Whatever. Like, you are expecting that throughout the movie. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong at all. Mm-mm.
Like, and so then the movie is just not interested in going there.
Right.
And it's a much more realistic, grounded kind of event that has propelled the actual events of the movie.
Sure. Yeah.
How did your experience gel with that? Like, did you know enough about the movie to know, okay, I know what I'm not going to get, and thus I can set aside certain expectations?
I don't know if I don't think I really sort of tried to avoid spoilers for this film in any capacity. I didn't read any reviews of it. I didn't listen to anything about it. But what's fascinating is that I did sort of instinctively, maybe just because I had seen Krisha or however you say her name.
Yeah.
Maybe because I had seen that and kind of knew the sensibilities that this director was keen towards. I kind of suspected going into it, I was like, okay, we're not going to get Monster of the Week. Like, there's not going to be a very definitive sort of battle. And
that's exactly what I was expecting. Was Monster of the Week.
Okay, gotcha.
So you don't get it.
So I didn't actually. What I did think was possibly going to happen is I thought there was going to be some sort of influential force that was pushing certain key elements of the narrative in certain specific ways. You know what it reminded me a lot of, even though you definitively do see her character in this film, is it reminded me a lot of The Witch. Not just because it was the same studio, A24, but it reminded me a lot of The Witch. The dread building, the imminent threat, but also kind of the unraveling from within sort of playing out.
I would definitely put those in similar categories.
But in The Witch, you do actually see the witch a small handful of times. And in this one, dude, I tell you, man, the freakiness of some of the shots. Here's what I wrote down. I wrote down about maybe 2 notes for this film. The rest is just sort of swirling around in my head while I'm trying to piece it together. But one of the notes I wrote down, and I hope this is not just too wild to not make sense, but I said, this film uses darkness the way most films use light. That in sense of, most films seem to want to push the light to a place where you see very specific things. This film seems to use darkness to obscure very specific things, to where there are shadows placed in very deliberate places that you cannot see what's happening. I mean, like some of the shots when they're out in the woods at night and skirting their flashlight across the trees, it is just hypnotic in the way that it suddenly the light will be cascading across the screen, and then there's a new branch or a new trunk that there was when it moves past, there's no longer any shape or resonance of. Like, it is completely obscured unless the light is directly hitting.
Well, I don't know if you remember about 3/4 of the way through, 2/3 of the way. This is when Stanley runs off, the dog.
Oh yeah, what a great scene.
There's a shot as Travis is chasing after him, and it's a wide shot of kind of a wooded area, but in the foreground there's this real craggy sort of tree branch thing that's obscuring some of the background.
Yes,
but the shot is framed through a kind of a big knot in the. It's not a tree trunk, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah,
it's a lot of sticks, and it's an amazing shot.
Oh yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. It's killer.
Well, and it's interesting. You said The Witch. Even as I was saying that, I was thinking of Witches, the Scott Snyder graphic novel. But like, let's jump in a little bit. So I know you said you've got very few physical notes.
Oh yeah, I only have like 1 or 2.
In terms of likes, dislikes, I've got more notes under scares than I do likes, dislikes. You'll get a kick out of this. So, one, I actually think to double back a little bit on assessing an initial viewing, even though I'd seen it and wasn't like fully dialed in for the entirety of a second viewing, I was much more gracious and found a lot more pleasure in the second viewing. Just because I'd kind of abandoned those expectations.
Sure.
That kind of hampered the first one, and
Understand.
really was able to plug into. Dude, I will say this, like, regardless of what the movie ultimately delivers or doesn't in terms of your desire for a monster or not, it is dreadful.
Yes.
I mean,
intensely.
The film craft of lots of long takes, the score, the tension.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. A movie like this gives you and I have talked about this over the last year and a half-ish as we've done The Fear of God, but in terms of credit given to performers in horror films, or the lack of occasionally giving credit to those actors, like, I'm thinking of the scenes where, say, like Travis has run out into the woods, and whether it's a dream sequence or the real when he's chasing Stanley, what the hell did this director tell him he's seeing? Because the look on that actor's face is pure dread, like otherworldly, inhuman dread of whatever he's witnessing.
Yes.
And whether it's that or just, I kept thinking about the stakes. For a movie whose threat is so obscured from your comprehension, those actors, the stakes are imminent and real and devastating.
Yes.
Like, the way they interact with each other, the heightened, it's not just, oh, there's Joel Edgerton yelling at that guy.
Right.
You know what I mean? It is like, no, there are very clear rules, and to break a rule is to endanger us all, and you're out of here. You know what I mean? Like, it is very real and very powerful watching these characters under threat.
Oh, absolutely.
That's where they're living.
Yeah. The scene, just real quick,
go ahead.
the scene where they're at the dinner table arguing, or
which part?
The time where they're trying to figure out who opened the door. Or who unlocked the door?
I've got that on my scares.
Oh, man, yeah. Well, we'll talk about it when you get there, because
well, it was so funny in talking about the conventions of the movie, the long takes, the scores, and things like that. You'll love this. So, I did see it in the theater, but it was earlier in the year, and so I didn't remember everything about it. And it's a movie about mood and atmosphere. My Apple TV is what I watch 99% of my media through, and it's been buggy, and it makes me so angry. It like makes me Hulk, this Incredible Hulk rage, when it gets glitchy. So I'm watching it, comes at night, and this is like, there's probably 10, 15 minutes left in the movie, and it's one of Travis's final dreams. It's the dream within a dream. You know what I'm talking about? The Inception, basically?
Yes.
It's scary as hell.
Oh, man, terrifying.
If you remember, it's a long push down the hallway, and he's holding a lantern down that scary friggin' hallway with all these smiling portraits of family folk. So scary. So the scene happens, and he's in, you got this long tunnel sort of image that ends in the background with the lantern and him standing in front of the door at the end of the hall. Well, then this audio starts happening of Stanley the dog barking, and I'm just enraptured by this image of Travis standing in the hall, and there's all this other audio happening. Reed, for like a solid minute and a half, I didn't realize my Apple TV had glitched out and had frozen the screen. That's how enraptured I was at the moment. I was like, oh my God, what is going on? I mean, it's a little weird that I'm hearing these things that I'm not seeing, but it kind of makes sense because this is that kind of movie, and it's so scary. Like, it had totally frozen. I didn't know it.
And you know what? I'm totally there with you, because in this film, I would have believed that. Yes, absolutely. I probably would have sat there with you like, wow, this is really, this is a bold choice.
My subconscious was kind of like, no, Nathan, it's just technology glitching. My conscious mind was like, oh God,
I know. Oh my gosh.
So that was I have that under likes, dislikes. The only other thing I have under likes, dislikes, I don't know if it's a like or a dislike. From a filmmaking standpoint, it's a like. From a story standpoint, it's an eminent dislike. It's an utter and absolute one. Is the final shot. of the two parents at the empty table.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
No, I understand. And it's devastating. It's really devastating. I don't know about you, but I got the distinct impression, just sort of reactionary. I could not quite tell because the moment is kind of brief. I could not tell. I mean, the thing that I'm clearly supposed to tell from that, because they've shown us that frame, that specific frame, like 3 or 4 other times in the movie.
Right.
So the one thing I'm specifically supposed to get is Travis is gone. So now Travis is done. What I also could not tell, because it was just like one little brief little shot, is I couldn't tell if they had also become infected now at this point.
No, I don't think so.
You think
I
think they're just devastated because he's gone. Okay. Yeah.
Well, yes, and I'm going to add to it. I don't think they are I don't think you're meant to visualize them as infected. I do think the sledgehammer of that moment, yes, is Travis's absence, but almost more than that is the specter of their imminent death themselves. You know what I mean? Like, it's we're not going to, we can't run from this thing.
Yeah.
You know, whatever it is. In other words, you almost forecast if there's another 30 minutes to this movie, that 30 minutes is going to finish with her by herself at the table or him by himself at the table. You know what I mean? Just this continual absence and departing of loved ones.
Fading away, is it, if you will. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's unless you have other specific notes on likes, dislikes, let's jump into scares. What you got?
Yeah. I mean, I would praise all of the. We can definitely jump into scares. I would praise all of the things that you're praising. The performances are strong. The filmmaking sensibilities are really strong. This is a film that really heavily capitalizes on what you don't see can be just as terrifying as what they show you. Even to amplify what you're saying. I'm sorry if I totally you're fine. You're fine.
It's not even just what you don't see; it's what you don't know. Like,
I agree.
As a viewer of this movie, you are to borrow an element you referenced a minute ago. You're utterly in the dark. You're like, I'm not sure what is going on. Why these people are so terrified, but they are terrified.
Yeah.
And,
And clearly, they are not in the know. I shouldn't say that clearly because this is a lot of inference that I'm making, but it's a safe inference given how they handle sickness when it comes, that they don't have a deep understanding of what all this is either. It's just like, you've got the sickness, so... Like poor old Bud, take you out and do away with you and burn the body. Like, they don't understand this any more than anybody else does. At least they don't appear to. And I think it's funny. I've tried in the, because it's now, as the time we're recording, it's been less than 24 hours since I've seen it. So in this brief amount of time, I've been trying to wrap my head around what I think it is. Like what I think the "it" of the title is referring to. I did read. That's
mathematic notes, but go ahead. Yeah.
We can save some of this conversation for when we get there. But I did read in the trivia where the entire cast, whether or not they were directly informed what the director and writer thought, had to sign non-disclosure agreements that they would not reveal what any sort of clues as to what the director had given them to what it is, the "it" of the title. But I found that fascinating. There's a lot of things to transition into scares. There's a lot of really horrifying things that take place in this movie. The sense of dread is relentless and palpable. Like, it is a 90-minute clenched fist. Like, there is no relief. There's maybe a couple of blips of moments, like right after Will arrives with his family and everything, and there's a couple of like happy close.
Well, there is this like kind of pleasant montage of them sort of acclimating to each other, and you're just like, this isn't
not going to go well. Yeah, exactly. Enjoy it while you have it. So, but apart from that, just the whole film is relentlessly dreadful. There's a couple of very well calculated and I think very effective jump scares. Almost all of them involving, and some of them may be on your list, but almost all of them involving, Travis's dreams and the things that he sees take place in his dreams.
Well, and It's funny, just further adding to the mystique of the whole goings on, like from a storycraft perspective, I imagine it was the screenwriter, you know, as opposed to just a director choice or something. Like it was a pretty brilliant call to make Travis's dream sequences part of the narrative, just because it amplifies. Because you could almost say they're not necessary, you know, kind of story wise, but
right.
If dreams are expressions of subconscious, you are getting a peek into his internalizing what's going on in his life.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like
absolutely.
his perspective on what's happening lends us some sort of peek behind the curtain of what's going on in this world.
Sure.
Yeah.
By the way,
go ahead.
The director wrote this, so it's a writer-director auteur sort of piece.
I did not realize that.
Yeah.
Okay, makes sense. I wrote the initial dream sequence with the long push down the hallway.
Yeah.
To Grandpa on the bed, recoiling and vomiting. Oh my God!
And I had the volume turned up pretty loud too, which was a mistake. That was an error in judgment on my part, because the film is relatively quiet, you know, it's pretty subdued. So I'm sitting there volume down, and I even had my hand like on the volume because my family was sleeping at the time that I watched it. So I even had my hand like on the volume, like, oh man, what's about to happen? And then it gives you no warning. It gives you no ramp up. It's just silent, and then screeching, howling, banshee-esque kind of yowl, and I was like, oh, good grief. Almost came off the couch. Yeah, it was horrifying.
Well, and it's been a while since I've seen a movie so effective at just slow takes. I mean, this is a movie that just is not interested in getting you there fast, because the slower it takes to get there, the more freaked out you're going to be.
Yes.
I mean, it is so deliberately paced, and I love it. I've got several scares here. Many of them are the dreams. The dream of Kim.
Oh, vomiting up in his mouth.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, and what's so like disturbing about that scene? It's funny you invoked the witch here, because even watching it last night, I wouldn't have remembered to bring it up in this conversation, but even watching it last night, I thought about the burgeoning sexuality of the children characters in The Witch, and how they don't know what to do with that as characters, you know?
Right.
And I think what's fascinating about this movie is, like, in a normal world, Travis is having totally normal dreams. You know what I mean? Like, this is total.
Yeah, sure.
Like, attractive female he's interested in. He's having these dreams about her. But then you add this freaky deaky layer of the horror they're living through.
It's grotesque element.
Oh my gosh, it's so. Ugh.
Yeah.
So there's that. I've already referenced the dream within a dream. Where I mean, that's the final dream where he's chasing Stanley through the woods. Whoa. He wakes up. He quote unquote wakes up, sees the boils on him.
Yes.
And chocolate. I called it chocolate syrup. He chocolate syrups.
Yeah.
Sees Grandpa. I honestly, so I'm saving my scariest moment for last, but I've got one more. Dude, the tragedy and sort of layers of the scene when I called it the brother scene, when Will is talking.
Oh,
is Will the new guy?
Will's the new guy.
Edgerton's character.
Yeah,
I can't remember Edgerton's character's name.
Edgerton's character is named Paul. Will is the one he brings into his house.
Right.
Yeah.
When you learn there's no brother.
Oh my gosh.
Like, that is an exercise in acting. Like,
yes,
the two of them in that moment of both knowing.
Yep.
But not playing the card fully. Well, because what's so devastating about that is, like, I do think, correct me if you think this is a wrong interpretation, I think you are ultimately meant to think Will, Kim, and Andrew are totally kind of harmless. Like, they are just folks like these guys trying to get by.
That's exactly what I think.
And Will, in a moment of weakness, spun some half truths to try to get to try to ingratiate himself to these folks.
Yes, I agree.
Well, this is a world where your half truths are going to get you killed because we can't abide it. And that moment is just the death knell for the whole story.
Yeah. And at that point, he's so comfortable with his situation with Paul that he's not remembering. Oh yeah, months, weeks ago, months ago, however long it was, I spun him a lie that said I have a brother, and he covers it quickly, but we all know.
Yeah,
everybody knows.
Yeah,
it's like, oh crap. Well, the moment that is, I don't know if this is your scariest moment, but occasionally a film will make me sort of feel this way, and I'll have to do this. Immediately following the film, because of this sequence, I went in and sat down by my son's bed and just sort of like put my hand on his back, because of that whole sequence where he has either through sleepwalking or something wandered into the grandpa's room, and then of course all of that. And then he crawls into the bed, but I knew even then at that moment, I was like, he made it into the grandpa's room, like this is going to be the turning point, like something.
Hey, real quickly for me, I feel really stupid hearing you say that now. I don't know that I consciously registered that it was the grandpa's room that he. Yeah,
he made it into Bud's room.
I think in my head, I thought he had a room and he just ended up on the floor. But no, that makes perfect sense. Yeah. Why that changes things dramatically. Yeah,
he was located in Grandpa's room, and so then, then immediately following that, and so like from a very direct narrative standpoint, like God only knows what happened in the middle of the night. Maybe the kid just got up and wandered, was trying to find the bathroom, or was just half asleep or whatever, stumbled into the room, got sick from just being in Grandpa's room, because Grandpa's room is like, whatever Grandpa had. And then that, starts this whole unraveling of this little, microcosmic thing that they've got going on. But, when that all culminates up and Paul fires and Kim is just screeching out that he's killed her baby.
Right.
I'm just like, oh my God. Yeah. I almost paused the movie. I didn't ultimately pause it. I waited until the end of it, but I went and sat in my son's room for a little while and just put my hand on his back, because so those moments, they get to me, man. They just really do a number on me. And that was really devastating.
Well, and we've had conversations along these lines before of a conscientious filmmaker, like the resistance to show any of that.
Yes, exactly.
In any sort of up close fashion is far more devastating. I mean, it
absolutely.
is. Yep. Like the first time I saw the movie, I think I was so arrested by waiting to know what are we waiting on or getting to that I didn't quite feel that moment as much as I did in the second. Like I was in tears. I was in tears during that scene, just straight up. I mean, she's just so pitiful. And Joel Edgerton, we referenced him before on The Gift. I think only The Gift, right?
That's the only one of his that we've covered. Yeah.
He's so good in this, and that moment of her screaming and the camera's on his face right before he finishes her too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think he was intending full on like kill this child from that initial gunshot,
Yeah, I don't think so either.
That second shot is definitely intended to put her down.
Yeah. No question.
And you just see this look on his face that's real broken and gone and resolute.
Yeah. Ugh. And he falls apart shortly thereafter. I mean, because of the whole thing.
Yeah.
I mean, you could say it's because he understands Travis is sick. You could say it's because of a number of things, but he has a breakdown shortly thereafter. Right. That whole entire exchange. Yeah, and I think too, it's just, did you have any more for scares specifically?
No, my final you alluded to, but my final scare was just the gunning down of Andrew.
Yes. Oh, it's devastating. I'm trying to wrap
which is so funny
around.
Because like this is going to sound like such a terrible thing to say, but I don't really like Andrew. You know what I mean? Like,
no, I know
the scene, the scene when it's like, I don't remember. Shut up, kid. Yeah. Come on, man.
Yeah.
It's life or death here. Just remember something.
Yeah. No, I know what you mean. But I think that's the thing that, I don't know. This is happening in real time, so I don't know if I would land here. And you seemed to have some very specific ideas about this. So I'm going to use this as an opportunity to pivot to you for some thematic stuff. But one of the things that I was thinking, because you spend with a title like "It Comes at Night,"
right?
Like,
right.
I spend the film again, kind of having an instinct that we're not going to get a monster of the week. I kind of spend the film wondering what it is referring to. And one of the things that I kind of landed on, at least in the watching of the movie was that it is this sort of, I don't even know the words that I would use to try to wrap around it, but a sort of insatiable fear or dread that will cause you to do things that you know are going to end in your own destruction, or at the very least the destruction of those you love. But that fear and that dread just cannot be left alone. Like, and here's what I'm thinking. They just wanted to leave. Will and Kim and Andrew, they just wanted to leave. And I get it. I think his wife, Sarah, she even says, well, I think she says at one point, well, what happens when they run out of food? Like, they're going to come back, like they're going to come back, and they know where we are, and they know our rules, and they know how to get in, and all this other sort of stuff. So I get like her sort of putting forth that fear out there. But I remember thinking in that moment, kind of mentally trying to beg Paul to let them go. Like, just let them go. Just let them leave. Let them take whatever they want and just let them leave. But this fear that they have has driven them to a point where that's not an option anymore. Like, they're not going to just let these people go. They're not going to just let ways part. There has to be this finality to it. And I don't know. Like I said, this sort of thematic concept is almost happening in real time, but that was something that I really sort of got under my skin about this whole notion again of just what fear will drive you to do and what fear and terror will push you towards. But yeah.
Well, I think in a real literal sense, like what I wrote down, I've got a number of notes here for theme, but some may sort of thread into each other. But I said, the title, what does it mean? And I wrote fear, paranoia, panic. I do think, and on a certain level, post-apocalyptic stories are all similarly about this, but this particular version of that does it even more so. Several thoughts that are happening simultaneously here, but one, scripturally, I thought of prowling around like a roaring lion.
Yeah, seeking whom we may devour.
Right. Steal, kill, and destroy. This sort of, in the night, you are vulnerable.
Yeah.
In the night is when people succumb the most to those sorts of fearful thoughts and paranoid, sort of trains of idea in the nighttime. But more than that, so there's two kind of main threads I want to pull out here for a second, but like, one I wrote down that I think is pretty major, and that's, I wrote fear of the other. And I do think what's fascinating about this movie is it really doesn't care what has gone on in the world.
Yeah.
In terms of the specifics. It only cares about how that thing that has gone on affects human relationship.
Right.
And what I wrote down is a world created by fear and paranoia and absent compassion is a world where everyone is enemy and there is no community.
Yes.
Because, like, even Paul says to Travis at one point, he's sort of admonishing him for what he notes is admiring of Kim from afar. And he says, you can't trust anybody but family, as good as they may seem.
Right.
But what's interesting about that read is, like, the movie begins with them excommunicating and torching Bud.
Right.
Which isn't uncalled for in the circumstances, but it is saying their family, like.
Right.
So you can't totally have this conversation without acknowledging sort of the sort of contagion element of the movie itself. But I do think there's something real specific intending to be discussed about what happens in a culture deprived of trust,
right,
and compassion, and this may sound, a tinfoil hat of me, but I do think there are forces at work in our culture and society that are interested in division, and I don't even mean just in a literal spiritual sense. I mean,
sure,
like,
right.
Just market forces, or to me, it might be like, I'm going to draw a very direct line here, like the NRA, these sorts of entities that, in order to cultivate their bottom line, if you will, promote fear. You know, I mean, and I mean that in a real clinical sense. I don't even mean that in a judgmental sense. You know, like,
sure,
if you're afraid of the other, you're going to arm yourself. If you're afraid of the other, you're going to steel yourself against. And I just think, as I illustrated or tried to point out with that final shot, what's so scary about that is just this diminishing community.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that ultimately there, again, flash forward 30 minutes of movie, maybe a week of real time in the movie, and it's just going to be one of them.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I don't know if you have any thoughts in response to that, but fear of the other, that was a really big sort of. Okay, yeah, please.
Yeah, just this idea that you referenced that brother scene earlier where we realized that Will has been lying to him about a brother. Well, in normal conversation, somebody might be willing to like trust him enough to call him out on it and be like, "Hey, so did you lie to me? I did have you tied up and put a sack over your head and blah blah blah."
Right.
Did
having some sympathy, right.
Yeah. Did you lie to me because of that, or or what was going on? Have you lied to me about anything else? Like, now that you kind of see how things operate, like, is everything okay? But no, it's like it immediately introduces this element of distrust that then festers and filters through every future interaction that we see between any of them.
Right.
And so the fear of the other is so easily validated. It is so easily validated. Like, when you fear someone who is not like you, or someone who is outside of your experience culturally or socially or whatever, when you fear that person, then anything is capable of validating that fear. Even the most innocuous, seemingly sensible and reasonable and perfectly understandable things, like lying in a moment where you're being grilled because somebody's got a gun and is threatening to blow you away and destroy your family and blah, blah, blah. Like, plenty of people might make up a lie on the spot for that, you know? But,
right.
And that's just what it makes me think. So my only sort of immediate thought to that is that fear of the other is so easily validated. It's so quickly affirmed.
Well, and I think too, and I do have another thematic thought that's a little more muted than this one, but one of the reasons I would say fear of the other is such an intentional, predominant theme is, you referenced this already, but the dining room scene or the dinner table scene once the Andrew stuff starts.
Yes.
Because what's so amazing from a filmcraft standpoint about that scene is the intentionality of what we, the audience, doesn't know.
Yes.
Because we like Travis and so are prone to side with him, but we are also empathetic and have seen enough to maybe buy into the viability of Will and that family.
Yes,
and
exactly.
So we are conflicted.
Yes.
And that's a really impressive feat to pull off.
Yeah.
But is really, again, why I would say fear of the other, truth versus trust, is really on this movie's mind in a very palpable way, because in a normal scenario, not in the middle of a broken society plagued by an actual plague, how would you handle that situation? You know what I mean? Like,
right.
You know, Joel Edgerton's sitting there, and bless his heart, he's stuck. Like,
yeah.
How do you reconcile this situation? You've got the child who's an unreliable narrator and can't tell his story.
He specifically can't remember. Right.
Right. You've got Travis, who only experienced and saw so much, but is accounting for a door that's open, the door that's never supposed to be open.
Yeah.
You've got him saying, "What are you talking about? He's too short." All of these things are real and true.
Yes.
You know, like,
yeah.
Well, and thus, how do you live and deal?
Right.
You know,
well, because that was one of the impressions that I got, is I was like sitting there and I didn't know where the narrative was going to go from there, but I was sitting there in the moment and I'm like, I don't know if the son's telling the whole truth, but they're hitting it pretty hard that he's too short to open that door. So it probably was not him opening that door. So what does that then mean? Does that mean it was the dad? Does that mean it was Travis himself sleepwalking in some sort of bizarre dream state? Exactly what it is. And
well, if I can throw at you, I
sure.
personally, My interpretation of that scene is I do think Andrew did it.
Interesting. Okay.
And which isn't me indicting Andrew. It's simply to say I think the short factor that Will offers is meant to give each character a valid position. Like,
okay, gotcha. Yeah.
Like, to me, it makes sort of sense that Andrew might be able to have done this. It stretches a little bit, but I don't think Travis would do it. And I think Will has a valid point. So anyway, the point I'm trying to make is simply, I think him offering the shortness of Andrew as a conversation point is really just meant to have everybody on an even argument standpoint. We've all got valid things here, which means it's almost that much more impossible to reconcile what we do.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and isn't that the moment, correct me if I'm misremembering, but isn't that the moment that it's like the open door is where they found Stanley, is where they found the dog?
Yeah.
Like the door is open and then that's when they find him bloodied and just jacked up, which, talk about a quickly add to your scares moment, man. I almost freaked out when I'm looking over there like, oh my God, what happened to this dog? Because that dog,
right.
He looks so mangled.
He's been plagued? He's got the plague?
Well, I couldn't tell if the story was trying to tell me that he had the plague or that he had come in contact with some other kind of wild animal. Like, I couldn't tell because he looks like he's been wounded. He doesn't just look like he's gotten sick or something. Like, he looks wounded. Now, maybe that is right. Maybe that is an element of the plague, is that their skin just bleeds. Like I'm not quite sure, but yeah, it was just, the film itself, I think, is playing with this notion, like we've both already sort of alluded to. I think you explicitly stated it at one point, that you could make the statement, it comes at night. Well, what comes at night? We don't know precisely. It's like, because it is this whole fear of the unknown, that it's like, because he says, Paul at one point says, we don't go out at night, like none of us ever, unless we can absolutely help it. And the film never explores why, because they go out in the daytime without masks, like, so who cares? Yep. So what is it in the dark that's not there in the light time? And it's really fascinating to think about that, and I would almost wrap again, to repeat that sequence, like, it comes at night. Well, what comes at night precisely? Like the idea of just perpetual fear driving you to a place to where again you're sort of,
well, and what's fascinating on a meta level is, like, there are many movies that I love for their ambiguity and am totally at ease and resolved and settled and content and happy with the ambiguity. Much of which I would say about this, but it still gnaws at you.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
you're still like, no, but really, what is it?
What is it?
Exactly.
I tell you.
Okay, I get it. Academically and intellectually, I'm on board with you, buddy. But no, really, what is it?
Tell me. It's like, I just want to send a big, he'll never listen to this, but I just want to send a big thank you to Jeff Nichols for preparing me to watch movies like It Comes at Night, with his whole ambiguous, we don't really know what's really going on in the story kind of thing.
Sure.
But
I did want to throw one other sort of thematic thread at you and just sort of see.
Sure.
It's a little less formidable than the fear of the other, but I think something this movie. So although it is entwined, I think what's interesting to me about this movie is, you've got this family unit, which on a certain level, and I even mean the Paul, Sarah, Travis family unit. So not even the sort of fly in the ointment of Will and that family. So like the family unit we're meant to be, like, on board with. So ostensibly, we are rah-rah, gung-ho for them. But the events of this world continue to push us further to the entropy of community, right?
Yeah.
And it's almost like if you had this sort of linear, this sort of line, and on one end is fully diverse, enmeshed, relational, beautiful community. On the other end, you have utter isolation, loneliness, just inability to connect. And it's like what we're watching is almost the last vestiges before that, right? There is no community. And taking that a step further, what really was arresting to me, it's not as prevalent as fear of the other, but it did really haunt me, what I wrote down is what happens when touch is forbidden.
Ooh. Yeah.
Because I think what's interesting, and we alluded not by name to this last week a healthy bit, but the sort of Me Too moment we're in, which in many ways I'm very much on board with. I feel like we've referenced him before on the podcast, but you're familiar with Jean Vanier, right? Large
very
community.
much so. Yeah. And we have talked about him before.
I would encourage any listener to go find his NPR interview. It is beautiful and holy. But in it, he talks about touch. And he and Krista Tippett have this lovely sort of back and forth. And he laments how grossly sexualized we have made touch.
Yes.
Which isn't him lamenting sexuality at all. It's simply saying, what a sad world and what a sad state of being, and how fractured we are when we either recoil at touch, or we reject it completely, or we have been abused by it.
Right.
And this movie just moves in that direction, which is isolation, untouchability, and it's like, what happens when we just lose that capacity to have tenderness and care and touch? I don't know if that makes any sense at all, but
it makes a ton of sense. I'm sitting here thinking about the notion of I think most sensible people would acknowledge that there's a difference between these two things, but I think as a culture we've lost the understanding of intimacy apart from sexuality, of being just close without, I mean, they joke about how, men and women can't just be friends. But even more than that, two men or two women in just an intimate closeness of relationship, and people are gonna, their minds are gonna go to some strange sexualized place. And I do think that we have overly sexualized just touch and contact in general. There's a concept in my specific church circles, and I believe in your specific church circles as well, of the laying on of hands, of the contact being made, and the healing in scriptural contexts that accompanies the laying on of hands. And that is not in any way perverse. That is not in any way sexualized or abused in any capacity. But of course, not to get on a little mini sermon because we don't have the time for it, and it's not really that necessary. But the enemy of our souls has a converse, sort of perverse, opposite, counterfeit to everything that is pure and holy that we have that represents. So the healing nature of a community that can be in contact and can lay hands on one another with deep intimacy and without any threat of sexual abuse. The perverted opposite of that is one where every touch has an automatic connotation. Any contact has an automatic connotation.
Dude, I am not. Hey, let me interrupt you real quick. I am not making this up. I'd need to figure out what I would say to a listener to Google it and find it. In my sort of political observations these days, there was this video from some sort of, it wasn't like C-SPAN. It wasn't C-SPAN, but it was like that. It was like some sort of hearing or some sort of conference.
Sure. Right.
And there are two men sitting next to each other at a table of a panel kind of situation. One of them who is, kind of clearly he's smiling, and he's kind of, despite what seems like tension in the room, he's kind of enjoying being there or whatever, having this conversation. The other one, you can tell they're at odds, sort of philosophically. I'll call him the fun guy and the not fun guy. The fun guy, I'm not making this up, man. I wish I knew how to tell you who these people were so we could Google it and tell people to find it. Not because to make judgments of people, but because of this conversation. Fun guy, and just trying to sort of lighten a mood a little bit, kind of puts his hand on the arm of not fun guy and read, you would have think a snake bit him. And,
really?
The not fun guy, because he recoils. I am not making this up. And he says, I am a happily married, heterosexual man. And this is not and it was this, yes. And your heart breaks. And these are stupid names for them, but just to distinguish them, fun guy, like, he's clearly like, what on earth is going on?
Yes.
And tries to play it off and like, hey man, your thing's your thing. I didn't mean to, because it was utterly harmless,
Sure,
but,
of course.
But we are so acculturating ourselves to any and every touch having that sort of sexual dimension. Yes. And hear me, our bodies have a sexuality to them on
of course. On
all sorts of levels. It's not, we don't, to be a fully integrated person is to acknowledge that. But good Lord, what a dreadful place when, an absolutely harmless sort of gesture is recoiled from. And
right.
I am not that person who assigns real spiritual sort of, but you watch it and you're like, wow, that is dangerous and scary.
Yes. Yes. And I couldn't agree more. I think there's a reason why, you've seen the film Calvary. We watched it together. Yep, there's that moment where, the main character from Calvary, which, by the way, listeners, I haven't said it in a while. Like, watch Calvary. It's amazing. It's one of my favorite movies. It's beautiful and lovely and powerful. And yes,
especially at 2 a.m.
Yes. Yes. Regardless of how tired you are when you watch it. But there's a scene where the protagonist, who is a priest, is
Brendan
merely
Gleeson
walking
is beautiful
down,
and wonderful.
Yeah, Brendan Gleeson, please be my friend. Listen to this podcast and please be my friend. But he's walking down the road with a teen girl. He is having the most benign, innocuous conversation with her, just passing the time of day. And we know, because we've spent a lot of time with him, that there is nothing at all insidious about his conversation with her. But her guardian or father or somebody drives up, screeches the brakes, yanks out and says, "Get in the car," to her, and then starts laying into him. Insinuating oh yeah, you were just having a friendly conversation, huh? And the look on his face when the man drives off, the look of pain and hurt and accusation and shame and just everything. It's a powerful thing for us to think about in this moment, because
Did you see the movie The Hunt? Is that the name of it, with Mads Mikkelsen?
Okay, so here's what's funny.
Very similar themes here.
You have seen it?
Yeah, I've seen it.
Oh, okay. So it's been on my radar for a little while. I just got it from the library over the weekend. So I plan to watch it.
It will.
Yeah.
It's all of this.
Yes.
I mean, it's all of this.
It's this notion of you cannot, and it's what people have referred to. Man, we're going off on a tangent, but I think this is important.
No, but it's all in It Comes at Night. I mean, it's
absolutely. The assumption of the sinister in the perfectly benign and innocuous, because there is real danger.
But more than that, I want to drive this home. It's not just assigning sinister intent or motive to the benign. It is refusing the right, tender, healthy, and godly.
Yes.
Because of an assumption of the sinister.
Yes, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
exactly. It's not just saying what is neutral is bad. It's saying what is right, appropriate, healthy, and perhaps holy under certain contexts is bad.
Yes, exactly. And yeah, exactly. And we see that in so many places now. I honest to God, I say this in complete sincerity, I honest to God feel terrible for people who entered the priesthood because they felt a divine calling on their life to do good for their community, and then are saddled with all kinds of assumptions and insinuations about who they are and what they must secretly be doing and all of these other kinds of things. The same thing happens with, even though we ourselves would lash out against a lot of the sort of the more vocal varieties of them, with evangelicals, people who are sincerely devoted in their faith, but just there's so much wrapped up in, and like you said, because there is a lot of people who have abused those positions and who have abused those situations, because there are sinister things afoot, then we refrain and back away and retreat and shelter ourselves away from and isolate ourselves from doing the thing that we know will be good for us if we do this.
Right.
But we don't do it because it's a, fill in the blank on slippery slope, or, we can't give the appearance of impropriety, or can't do anything like that. I was having a conversation recently with someone who is on the board of a very large church. And I was talking to them about just the difficulty in handling bereavement in the community, because there are legal liabilities for even something as simple as setting up a meal train, or setting up things like hospitality to people, because there's all kinds of opportunities for people to just get out and sue you and do all kinds of crazy things. And I know some of this may just be sort of spiderweb tangents, but I think my point is this, that I'm wholeheartedly agreeing with you that we have, to our own detriment, backed away from things that are genuinely wholesome, healing, and good for us because of ways that other people have abused similar things. So now we won't engage in the holy and the right and the good because it carries the stains, as it were, when I would even be bold enough to say, our faith cries the reverse. Christ became sin in order to reconcile us. He got his hands dirty. He dug right into the middle of it. He touched lepers. He broke all kinds of those laws that were frowned upon. One of the most prominent passages in the book of John is the disciples walking up on him, talking with a woman who had a bad reputation, and he's alone with her.
Right.
And again, you and I've
said,
but
take it a step further. You just referenced the healing the lepers. I mean, to separate touch from the ministry of Jesus is to lose the ministry of Jesus.
I agree.
It's just not there. I mean, whether it's acting towards him and the woman touching the hem of his robe and the power going out from it, or the woman breaking the ointment or the perfume on his feet, that he receives, and so it's either that or him touching the leper, as you
Sure.
I don't know, man. I understand. It is perilous. Not perilous in a nihilistic way, but there is peril attached, and we must take great care in how we engage with each other.
Yes, you've got to be deliberate and intentional.
Yeah, and yet at the same time, I just can't. I can't separate, the reason I brought up The Hunt, and this doesn't spoil anything for you, other than you'd see in the trailer, but the reason that movie is so devastating to me is I think about that with me personally. I have such a love for children and and yet we live in a culture that I'm a large, hairy dude, you know what I mean? Would assign so much stigma and whatever to lovingness and affection towards children that is true and right and appropriate. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's such a devastating sort of thing.
Well, because Nathan, here's the thing. We do not trust each other anymore. We just don't.
Right.
We are so untrusting as a society because let's be candid about it, because that trust has been so violated and abused for so many years, and that it's been covered up and stigmatized and all of these different things. So we don't trust each other anymore. And I think that's one thing that truly is devastating, because man, I'm going to try not to get my preach on at an hour and 15 minutes into the conversation, but the fact is that kingdom work furthers community, furthers contact and connectedness, like the kingdom work does. What does the enemy's work further? Isolation, separation, division, yep. A severing of contact. And
mistrust.
Exactly. And so one of the things that I think that happens in our society, it's not only with the Me Too movement, though that is probably one of the easiest examples to point to, but also with our politics and also with our socialization, our labeling of certain people groups and ways we think about certain people and types of people, is that what will happen is that we will find ourselves in a position where we feel like we've got all of that figured out, and we separate it out and we say, okay, well, now you are, we've talked about this before on the show, where we say, well, now you are this thing. Now you are the sum of what this is, and this is all that makes you up, is that you have done this thing, or you are part of this group, or you are attributable to this thing. So that is all you are. That is as much as there is to it. And then we write people off, because it's really easy to do that. It's really easy to just sort of categorize somebody, slap a label on them, and then throw them into that group and say, okay, well, now you're that group. And
right.
And I think this is going to be probably a bit more bold and maybe a little bit more theologically forward than I am accustomed to being on the show. Maybe listeners will disagree with me when they hear me, and they'll be like, "Reed, you talk like that all the time." But I think if the enemy, which I do believe in an enemy of our souls, that's a whole separate conversation. But if the enemy wants to further work, what he can probably do is establish a legitimate problem where godly people have abused and done, and reasonably people that have been trustworthy in the past or have been seen as trustworthy have done hideous and heinous things, and then use that to perpetuate and foster a culture of mistrust, and to perpetuate and foster a culture of where now we look twice and second guess and overthink and overcomplicate every benign motion. Anything that happens then now has this very sinister air to it. Because how will we respond? How will we as people respond? Okay, hide your kids, hide your wife. We're just going to, I did that intentionally. We will shelter ourselves in and say, no, you can't trust anybody but family, no matter how nice they seem, no matter how much you like them. Right. You can't, to bring it back to it comes at night. No, you can't trust anybody but family. And then, it's an awful thing. I'm not going to get into any specifics, but I'm going to say this, and then I'm going to bring in the scripture verse, and then I'm going to shut up. If you have more to say, then please feel free to. But somebody who was very close to me recently went through a situation in which there was some abuse that was discovered in their family, perpetuated against one of the children connected to their family. And I can remember, and it was perpetuated by another family member. And I can remember one of the things that was said about
adult to child, presumably. I mean, I'm just for context, trying to understand what we're saying. Okay, right.
Adult to child abuse. And one of the things that was said by this dear friend of mine in sort of processing all of it is they said, ultimately, this person who perpetuated the abuse, this faith convicts me. I'm trying to be as anonymous as possible, so forgive me if this is too vague, but the person who I was speaking with in reference to their loved one and the person who had abused their loved one, they said of the abuser, they said, the truth is that they used to know the Lord, and they have strayed a far way. And the most that I want from them, regardless of what justice is served to them, is that they come back to know the Lord. And I was so convicted, and I was so humbled by just that expression, that would be what they would say in response to this devastation that had hit their life. And the scripture that I was thinking in terms of bringing this in, which I'll bring in very quickly because I know we need to wind down, is Psalm 91, which many may be familiar with as it's commonly referred to as the protection psalm. I'm going to read the first verse and then I'm going to skip to the fifth one. The first verse says this. It says, "Whoever dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty." And then verse 5 says, "You will not fear the terror of night, nor the arrow that flies by day, nor the pestilence that stalks in the darkness, nor the plague that destroys at midday." And so much of what we've been talking about, I think, boils down to we reject, almost accidentally, we reject the holy for fear of what comes at night, for fear of what's out there, for fear of the plague, for fear of being infected. So we then, by rote, reject what we sort of spiritually know to be good and wholesome and right, and we reject that connectedness and that further contact, if you will, that healing that comes from the laying on of hands. And people, if anybody's sitting there listening and you don't understand what I mean by referencing that scripture, then feel free to reach out to me. I'll talk to you more about that. But there is a connectedness that I feel like we must fight for as a body that is not abusive and that is not in any way perverted or inappropriate. And we must continue to strive for that connectedness so that it can create a striking contrast to those who would abuse and who would pervert what is good and right and holy. And that's my soapbox.
We are so broken.
We really are. We really are.
Which honestly, even in saying that, I think it's funny when you were describing that personalized scenario there, or there's the people in your orbit that have that story. I understand the impulse to this, but whether it's on social media or you've heard historically when someone referencing a story like that, or someone who has been sort of caught in an abusive situation as the abuser, and this sort of, I hate even saying it out loud, but I think you'll understand where I'm going with this, that sort of judgmental, well, there's a special place in hell for these kinds of people.
Right.
Like,
I've heard that many times.
I don't want to believe this, but I will say it and sort of hope for it, the opposite. But that's such an un-Christ-like response.
Oh, I wholeheartly agree.
That doesn't mean we don't grieve deeply the sort of way, the sort of deep sadness that we get a glimpse into of the world in those scenarios. We do grieve that very deeply and very powerfully, and we have to sort of wrestle through that. But
yes,
whenever we begin assigning people to an ultimate destiny based on them at their worst, we are in a really precarious place there.
Because let me tell you this, mini soapbox. Nobody in Scripture talked about hell more than Jesus did, but that was because he was at war with it, not because he relished those who were going to suffer it. And I could not agree more that this idea of just resigning somebody like, oh man, hell is going to be hot for them, and like taking some sort of sadistic glee in that, I do not understand that.
Right.
As a follower of Jesus Christ, I do not understand that. That is what I believe he emptied himself to rescue them from. I believe that is what he bled out to ensure that no one would have to experience. Not because I don't believe it's a reality. I do believe it's a reality, but because he was at war against it and against everything of it. And that's why it's un-Christ-like, in my view, to just dance on the graves of the damned. I would oppose that.
Well, and even almost more than that, it's like, it is his will that none should perish. And when we have a mindset that sets a person against restitution and restoration, we are the problem then. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yes. We are now the stumbling block towards their reconciliation.
Yes. When we
anyway,
yeah, yeah. When we don't,
it
have
comes at night.
It comes at night. Yeah, seriously. When we don't have a heart for the lost, it means that we're even more one of them. So I think after all of that heavy conversation, we could use an antidote.
David has questions.
You want to tell them what that's all about?
No. But I will. Yeah, we grade every more or less movie. Every movie that we discuss, we grade on a metric scale of David S. Pumpkins under the categories of. Read, what are the categories again?
Their style, scares, and substance.
Under the categories of style, scares, and substance. We love our alliteration here at The Fear of God. So read, It Comes at Night from 2017. This is other than our hashtag Alfred Letters entries. This is our 2017 horror movie retrospective month. It Comes at Night. In terms of style, how do you feel about the style of It Comes at Night?
I'm going to give it a 4.5. I was tempted to give it a 5, but because I think the filmmaking is really strong, and obviously 4.5 probably barely needs a qualifier, but it dings down a half a point for me just in how ambiguous it is. Maybe I'd like a bone here or there, but I mean, the filmmaking is so strong. So 4.5.
This is tough.
It's hard. I know.
Because, so style, like the reason I'm hesitating right now, like this is why this metric can be challenging sometimes. Like I'm going to be real honest right now. My impulse is 5s down the line, which implies like a top 10 movies of all time kind of thing. I don't mean that necessarily. But I think it is incredibly well made. And so in terms of style, I would be tempted towards a 5 because I think, like you just said, from a pure craft standpoint, it is fantastic. I agree. I agree with you. The ambiguity is a little, off-putting is a strong word, but having, like, if you had watched this a second time, and I would almost say, hey, give that a try in the coming months, I wonder if that 4.5 might be a 5. So all that to say, I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to give it a 5 in style.
All right. Well, what would you say for it in terms of scares?
It's 5. It's dreadful.
5?
It is terrifying.
Yeah.
And I joked about it at this point, feels like an hour ago, but like, I'm okay with ambiguity, and yet still I'm unresolved in like, what? No, really? What was it?
Right.
What is it?
Yes.
Is it a monster? Is it a behemoth? Is it a yeti? is it a little penguin in the woods?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, for me, almost the same exact thing I would have said for style. It's a 4.5 for me. Almost tempted to give it a 5, but there's just a little sort of ding down on some of its mystique. I don't know. Maybe touch base with me.
That one surprises me. I'm surprised you aren't fully on to the. Not that I think you should do a 5. I just mean like if being at a 4.5 for this movie. Like it feels like just push that boulder over the hill there, buddy.
I see how you're gonna be, but you know what? It's my rating. It's not yours.
It is. No, I'm not. I'm just responding to the rating. I'm not like saying
teasing.
You're an idiot. That's not what I'm saying.
No, I'm teasing. So, and then for substance, man, substance is tough for me because I think there's a lot there, but I also think we bring a lot to it. I'm gonna go to 4.
You're hedging in ways that must be how you feel hearing me sometimes.
Doesn't feel great, does it? No, I'm just kidding.
Well, again, it's not even because I'm like, that's ridiculous. Just, it surprises me to hear you hedge.
Yeah.
Substance.
My ratings are very instinctive.
Yeah, mine are too. I'm going to give it a 5. I just think there is a lot that if I were to reconsider any of my ratings, it might be style for the ambiguity factor, but I think substance, this movie is all about how and if we connect and what happens when we don't. Like, and I think that's really ripe for a substantive, and in a way that we sometimes do bring half of the substance conversation to the table, but I think dude, we just went all over the place in terms of conversation.
That's a good point.
And
point.
none of it is too far afield from what the movie does itself. Anyway, so yeah.
That is a good point. That is a good point. Well, all of that, all of that, and clearly, you feeling like I'd underplayed it a little bit. We still land at a 9 out of 10 David S. Pumpkins for old It Comes at Night. It's a powerful film. It's very affecting. Oh, I cannot believe we went this entire conversation, this lengthy conversation, and did not mention this. I stumbled across this in Trivial Bits. You know where the title comes from, right? It's not this has no... I feel like you've totally just teased me right now. You're talking about what the it of the movie is the whole time. You're like, oh, by the way, now that we're in our last 30 seconds. No. But this is verified that the title of the film is a reference to, I believe it's 2 Thessalonians chapter 5. Might be 1 Thessalonians, but it's the popular verse where it says, "The day of the Lord comes like a thief in the night." And that is actually where the title came from. That tells you nothing about what the it of the film is, but that is where they got the title. I'm not joking.
You're adding this right now. We've just talked for an hour and a half hypothesizing things, and that is a whole new. Because of course the thief, our security, our comfort, our ability to hold to each other is thieved from us.
Yes.
Thieves, precious. I can't believe you're just now bringing that into this conveation.
Well, you're welcome. I just wanted to see.
It came at night and took my goodwill towards you.
But no, look it up. That's exactly where.
No, I believe you. I'm saying I can't believe you're now making this a part of the conveation. That's a whole other thread.
Waiting this up. Well, I didn't want to close the loop and not bring it in. You
just opened it all the way back up.
Well, listen, the fear of God's the beginning of wisdom, but it's never the end of the conversation. I mean,
no, it isn't. Clearly, it's the beginning now.
so listeners, prepare for another hour and a half, and here we go. I'm just kidding. In fact, we're both so tired. We're just going to let you listen to our social media cues the way we have been doing. I think I'm just going to make that the thing now. 2018, just prepare for the social media stock outro. But sincerely, if you have thoughts on this film, we would love to hear about them. Nathan, thank you so much for having this conversation with me, man, and for pushing us to watch this film. This was good. We hope that listeners, you enjoy the rest of the films that we've got coming up, because we decided to pick some rather controversial entries. So stay tuned on social media to see where we're headed next, and then we'll see you next week.
See you next week, guys.
Bye.
The fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, but not the end of the conversation. To continue this conversation, you can follow us on Twitter at The Fear of God. You can visit us on Facebook to comment on one of our posts or post there yourself. You can follow Reed on Twitter at Reed Lackey. You can follow Nathan on Twitter at The Nathan Rouse. Visit morethanonelesson.com to leave a comment on this post or any of the other official episode posts. Email us, fearofgodpodcast@gmail.com, all one word, fearofgodpodcast@gmail.com. And last but not least, if you listen to us through iTunes, we would greatly appreciate a rating or review. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next week.